Hello and welcome to the Game Business Show with me, Christopher Dring. This week, yes, we're going to talk about Xbox, of course we are, but with GTA no longer in the year, what are going to be the biggest video games of 2025? Nintendo says it's planning potentially smaller games to counteract lengthening dev cycles. PlayStation first-party hit Helldivers 2 is coming to Xbox. Video Games Europe responds to the Stop Killing Games petition, and they've got a whole lot more beside. But before we dive into that, you may see there's somebody here. It's time to introduce my co-host, long-term friend and colleague, former editor-in-chief of GamesIndustry.biz and current communications manager at Digital Bandidos. I always get that name wrong. It's James Batchelor.
Hello, Chris. How you doing?
I'm all right. I hear you've launched a game.
I have. I've survived my first game launch.
Tell us about it.
Soulstone Survivors, available on PC, PS5 and Xbox. It's our first major launch as Digital Bandidos. It's a survivors-like, so it's kind of like your Vampire Survivors and stuff, but this one leans really heavily into the power fantasy side of things. And so you go from like, the developer Gamesmithing was basically saying like he wanted to have that feeling of power and so forth, that feeling of going from level 1 to level 100 in about 10 minutes, which is very much up my street. As you know, anything that's hard work is not my thing.
It's such a PR, James. You've changed.
I know. It's scary. It's honestly terrifying.
Here you are. You went straight into the pitch. I want to know how the personal experience for you was for the journey of launching your first game.
Well, last time I was on, I was so determined like not to say anything because I didn't want to become that PR, and then it just falls out. Yeah. No, I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying like kind of the change of pace and learning so much about kind of the process of releasing games. Yeah. It is amazing how many hoops people have to jump through to get a game even onto a system. Like, and that's not to say like the certification process. Like it's just really interesting, like how thorough it is.
Yeah.
And like how hard developers work right up to the wire. How much is involved in kind of promoting a launch and getting it out there. How carefully you have to choose that launch window, and like all the other factors that are out there, like that, competing for noise. I never kind of underestimated the job of PR. Now I'm in it, I realise I was right. Like it's a lot harder than I thought it was.
Yeah, I always thought it hard up to the point where I don't do it. Yeah. I didn't go in that direction. Well, thank you for joining the show. Normally we dive into our big topic, which we will do in a moment. But I wanted, when we recorded the show last week, James, we had Rebecca Valentine on, our former friend and colleague. And we recorded it literally as the news of the Xbox cuts were.
Love it when that happens.
Yeah, we were recording the episode and I kind of knew it was coming.
Yeah.
But what could I do? So I mentioned that there was something happening, but I couldn't talk about it on the show last week because I didn't know what the details were. We did do a piece. So if you go on thegamebusiness.com, I've written an article about it. I've really revealed my take on it. But to keep it short, you've all heard the stories by now. Xbox has made some cuts. The game Everwild, I'm gutted. Everwild isn't coming out anymore. Perfect Dark remake isn't coming out anymore. The Turn 10 studios reportedly sort of basically gone. I guess it's the engine team left and they're Forza Motorsports sort of gone. There's been some big cuts there at Xbox. I've given my views on it and you can read it on thegamebusiness.com. We're not going to talk about it here. Lots of people have given their opinions since and I've picked up on a few of these things. I've kind of come up with, I wonder if Xbox should be doing this in the future. And here's the thing, I think they are doing these things. One of those is they bought Activision Blizzard, and Activision Blizzard are very, very good at certain things. Really, really good, right? Then, they've launched the biggest video game, biggest shooter in the world in Call of Duty. Microsoft have loads of good shooters. I'm sure Halo, you don't want to, put it on Treyarch, but I'm sure they know a lot about what maybe Halo could do. And I'm sure they know a lot what id Software could do. And id Software's would have got advice the other way around. I really would love to see, when you buy a company, the idea is growing together. Stronger together. It's not just about adding things onto, bolting things on or boosting up your service with extra games. What can Call of Duty learn from id Software and Halo, as an example? What can Obsidian learn from, I know they've worked with them before, but Bethesda and those sort of things. That sort of work together. And I really would like to see those sort of, I know that the idea is they're not lightly integrated. They do their own things, but I think seeing them work together would be a really cool thing for Microsoft Studios. I think that might help them a little bit. I do think sometimes Microsoft overthink things. They are very much about strategy, and they always have been. It's all about, and these are wonderful strategies. I actually agree with them. Things like subscription's an interesting strategy. The Play Anywhere is an interesting strategy. All of that stuff is really cool. They're trying to push the industry forward. But obviously the important thing, and the thing they have to get right, and I do think they've been getting it right lately, is the games. The games have to be right. It doesn't matter if you have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't have hit games, not just good games, hit games, it doesn't matter. And I do wonder if sometimes they might make the games fit the strategy. So maybe they've got a game that perhaps day and date in Game Pass might not make sense, or maybe they release a game in a time that makes sense for Game Pass but doesn't make sense for the game. I'm making some speculation there. I do feel sometimes they make decisions that I do wonder if they're not thinking about the game, they're thinking about their business strategy, and that's the important bit. But sometimes it's worth breaking it a little bit if it's in favour of delivering a hit. But the big one that I've heard people talk about, it was Alex Donaldson on the VGC podcast. I don't know if you listened to this, James. He said Obsidian. Do you know how many games Obsidian have released since they got bought by Xbox, or they will have done by the end of the year?
I mean, I know they've had, is it 3 this year alone? Avowed, Grounded 2 and Outer Worlds 2.
Yeah. They also launched Outer Worlds 1 after being acquired by Microsoft.
And Pentiment.
Right? So they've done 5 games since being acquired by and there are some Xbox first-party teams that haven't released anything. And Alex's view on it, his opinion on it, and I thought it was quite interesting, is that Obsidian are used to, they can't spend 10 years making a game ever.
No.
If they ever did, they'd go out of business, right? So they have to deliver the games. And therefore they do things that are perhaps within their wheelhouse. They know what they do. They only push boundaries a little bit. They don't go completely reinvent the wheel. But they are used to, they've got to get the game out, right? And it's more out of fear. And I'm not saying that's great. Microsoft should take away the fear a little bit. But you do wonder if sometimes some of the teams and some of the studios are, Microsoft's wonderful about culture. They're wonderful about creating very welcoming, encouraging environments to encourage creativity. But there comes a point where you need to ship a game, or you need to start seeing progress in that game. And his point being that a lot of the studios that are being closed, or a lot of cuts are happening, are the studios that were either owned by Microsoft or owned by Bethesda, who were perhaps quite comfortable and they felt they could take their time, which they can to a point. And I do wonder. So what do you do in those situations? And the answer is, be a bit more of a bastard, right? And Microsoft's quite nice with it. And it's a weird situation to talk about this, because you don't want studios to be, if you start putting pressure on deadlines and putting stuff, that's where crunch comes into it. And that's where people are being unhappy.
And you don't want to rush games either.
No.
No,
and actually finding the fun is a key element of it. And that's how you deliver big AAA successes. But I think there's probably a middle ground between giving them the freedom, making sure they don't crunch, making sure it's a good, healthy environment, but also that little bit of pressure to make sure that, something comes out with pressure that a company like Obsidian will feel, knowing full well they have to survive, they have to deliver on that Kickstarter promise. I don't know. I'm sure these are all things, these are things, if Microsoft know better than me about those sort of things. But looking back, hearing what people are saying, I do wonder if some of those things would be interesting what Microsoft does. I'd say if you want to see the actual viewpoint on all of this, and it's super disappointing, I'm genuinely gutted. Thegamebusiness.com, I did a piece last week on it. But anyway, I want to get Xbox out the way before we delve into the main topic. And James, you hosted this last time. Do you remember?
I was racking my brain. I was trying to remember what we discussed last time.
Last time I put the hosting onto you, as you used to do, because you normally do the microcast, and here I am.
Which I was very comfortable with.
Yeah.
Just hand you a question and then I just have to sit quietly.
Yeah, I'm aware that I've already done a lot of talking, but I'm talking about games, and actually this is where you're much better than me at. So Grand Theft Auto 6 got delayed, and then people said to me, what else is there in the year? Mm-hmm. And I wanted to find out, actually, what are the biggest games coming out this year? Don't know if you remember. Do you remember the 12 games of Christmas?
I do. I was thinking back to this when I was preparing for this episode. I was remembering that that feature that we used to do. So like back on the publication, we used to work it on around kind of September-ish, wasn't it? We used to do like the 12 games that are going to save Christmas. And it was like, right, here's 12 games that are going to keep people coming into retail. They're going to be the biggest sellers. And we did that like every year for a good few years. And I still find myself falling into that mindset. Certainly once you hit June, and you've got E3 or not E3 out of the way, what are the 12 games? I found it really interesting. We're going to go through the list that you've prepared here, but I'm going to go on a brief ramble first, if I may.
Please.
I just found it really interesting. Like I know sometimes my head, and I know sometimes your head, gets stuck in those kind of, our MCV days is like, pre-2015.
Yeah.
So the industry was a completely different place. But you have those big games, you had those staples. You always had a Call of Duty. You often or always had an EA shooter. You always had FIFA, you always had a big Ubisoft game, and there was always a few big third-party games. You'd have a big game from each first party, and that was pretty much your 12 games. And I look at the slate now, or at least I look at the wish list now, as like, the staples aren't there. The staples are different. You don't look at it and it's like, oh yeah, that's your classic Q4 lineup.
Well, it's interesting because I know exactly, I was going to say the same thing. I'm aware that I actually don't know what the big game's going to be. There used to be a time I kind of knew.
Yeah.
Like, we kind of knew, it was kind of obvious. And okay, I don't mean FIFA and Call of Duty, that's still obvious.
Yeah.
But it was like, it was all oh, it'll be an Assassin's Creed game, and then some of them there might be a surprise or two in there, but you could almost do it by clockwork. I had to say, the reason why James is hinting here, I created a list, and what I did is I went to Game Discover, who gave me their list of the biggest games still to come out this year. It's actually slightly different to the list I gave you, James, because one of them was missing from the list. But one was Game Discover. That's Wishlist. That's Steam. We could have done it via their hype score. They've got loads of different ways of ranking what might be the biggest games of the year. I also went to IGN. They have a wishlist system as well. They have through their playlist, and they got their biggest games still to come this year. Fandom, who run GameSpot and also run loads of wikis. They gave me a list of their traffic, what games generate the most traffic on their sites, on their wikis. And I also went to Fancensus, who gave me a load of social data, how many social posts, how many press articles. So I went to a load of people to try and work out what the biggest games are. There are actually a few in here. There's a few surprises, but actually most of them I actually thought, oh yeah, I'm not surprised that's the list. I'm not surprised that's the list. I'm not surprised that's the list. So it's not as surprising as I thought it was going to be.
I guess a caveat there to add would be, obviously, like for the stuff based on wish lists, and this is the tricky thing about wish lists. Wish lists are such a wonderful indicator of what people are interested in and are intending to buy, but they're not an indication of how many people are going to buy it day one.
Yeah.
Because some people will keep it on their wish list until it's in the sale or as a price point they like. And they're like, so it's a really tricky balance of wish lists and how that translates into actual success.
Yeah. So it's certainly a different industry, but actually, and here's the thing. The things that actually might end up doing really well aren't on these lists. You know, we've just had, was it Peak? Just on 4.5 million units, right? And that wouldn't have been on any list going into this. So it's worth noting that these are just the games that are getting a lot of buzz, a lot of attention, a lot of wish lists. I'm going to start with the games that appeared on every list. And the one that appeared highest on every list is Borderlands 4.
Yeah.
Which I know is right up your street.
I'm really intrigued to see how this one does, because I loved the first two Borderlands. I just played them to death. I don't think I made it through pre-sequel. 3 was the biggest one in terms of sales success. And there was all that furore around the movie last year where the movie did not perform as well.
Do you want me to do what do the numbers mean? Do you want me to do one?
Yes, I do. Yeah. Give me some numbers.
So Borderlands is the biggest franchise on this list, right? The last game sold 22 million copies. It's the fastest selling game 2K has ever released.
Wow.
It's still got a bit of catching up to do on Borderlands 2. That's on over 30 million, but it's getting there faster at the moment. There was the spin-off game, Tiny Tina's Wonderland. It's not quite the same level, but 2K said it beat expectations. And looking at European figures, it's not that far off 4 million copies across Europe, which is actually quite a lot, really. So it's getting more than I was expecting. You're probably looking, I don't know, maybe around 10 million globally. So that's wonderful. Now, you mentioned the movie. So the movie was a box office flop. It generated $33 million at the cinema, and it was probably made on a budget of estimates between 120 to 150 million. But here's the thing. During the summer, when it was included into PlayStation Plus, this Borderlands game. So during the summer when that Borderlands movie came out, there was a lot of activity around the game. Yeah. So they put the game into the PlayStation Plus subscription service. And according to Ampere, 2.15 million people played Borderlands 3 in July last year. That rose to 2.16 million when the film was released in August. So that's 2 strong months. Borderlands 3 game sales rose 418% across Europe, right? So it's huge, and it still is huge. And Borderlands 4, it's the number 3 game on the Steam wish list. I know you've probably got it down as number 2, but it is number 3 on the Steam wish list according to Game Discover. It's number 10 on the IGN wish list, which is a bit surprising to me. Mafia is actually ahead of it. It's a bit weird. Maybe IGN fans are just not Borderlands fans. It's number 1 for fandom on traffic, and according to Fancensus, Borderlands 4 has achieved more press coverage and more social posts than any other game due this year. Obviously, one thing I will say, I should have said this beforehand, none of these lists feature Call of Duty, EA Sports FC, NBA or Madden.
I found that really interesting. But then again, I guess this is wish list. Like, there's no point wish listing Call of Duty because people know they're going to buy it.
It's also very little has been shown about it.
Yeah.
But also, I think these lists are naturally very gamery.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, shock, Borderlands 4 is one of the biggest releases coming out this year. Yep, that's one for your surprise. Are you much of a Mafia player? That's also on every list.
I really need to get into this series. Like, I hear really good things about it. I remember trying Mafia 2. I know Mafia 3 had its technical problems, but I think overall it was quite well received. Mafia, the old country, is going to be very different. It's in, if I remember rightly, it's in that August slot.
Yeah.
at the end of August, which is usually where, like, historically there have been some kind of not surprise hits, but like games that
Do you sometimes have a game that lands there that does very well? And you're thinking of things like in the past we've had Bioshock, which go back to 2007.
the risk of going further back. I'm thinking Bioshock, I'm thinking Batman, but I'm also Baldur's Gate 3 was August. So August is this weird window where you beat the Q4 rush, but you're after the summer drought.
But I am still confused by Mafia's release date, and I'll explain why. Obviously, they delayed GTA to Take-Two.
Yeah.
This is a different division of Take-Two. It's a very busy summer for 2K. They're just releasing a load of games on Switch 2. They just released Civ on Switch 2. They've got more to come. They've got WWE launching on Switch 2. They've got Mafia in August, Borderlands in September. NBA will be around this slot as well.
Yeah.
I'm like, could you guys give yourself a bit of a break? Regardless of whether or not the release date's right, Mafia 3, you mentioned it there. There has been some Mafia remakes and remasters since this game, but we've got data for Mafia 3. Sold 7 million copies over 4 years. That was the last time we saw a brand new Mafia game. So it's a bit of a dormant franchise. It appears on every single wish list. So it's number 6 on Steam wish list, number 7, I think, according to Games Discover, number 7 on the IGN wish list, number 7 on the fandom charts, number 4 in press coverage, number 9 in social posts. Just the lower half of the list, but it's on every list. And here's the thing, I'm bringing up Mafia and Borderlands. The reason why I've stuck those two together, they're both 2K games. They're both Take-Two games. And it's interesting to see in the absence of GTA, the two games that have suddenly jumped towards the top of the list are Take-Two games.
Yeah.
So it's a big year for Take-Two, even without its big game.
I don't think I really realised that Mafia is that popular. I like the GTA 6 is still the elephant in the room here because I know it got delayed in, was it April or May?
Yeah.
But by April, May, most publishers will know what their Q4, certainly the AAAs will know what their Q4 titles and stuff would be locked in. So I have to wonder, things like Mafia, was that right? Ideally, we want to get this out before GTA because how will it compare after GTA? I know they're not directly comparable titles, but they are still gangster-related action pace.
If Mafia was coming out in August and Borderlands in September to get out of GTA's way, but Mafia's release date was announced after the GTA reveal, so they had a chance to move. But look, here's the thing. Actually, as I did this list, I found out there's a lot more games coming out in October than I had expected. But we'll get onto this. Now, the reason why I think the list I sent you, James, a little bit early was a bit wrong was because there's one game that isn't in the Game Discover wish list, which is Hollow Knight Silksong. And the reason for that is it's listed as TBC in terms of release date on Steam, so it didn't get pulled through. Once you pull it through, it's the number one wish listed game on Game Discover. Now, Hollow Knight Silksong, I'm not very. Have you played Hollow Knight? No, this is a weird thing.
My only experience of Hollow Knight is the sheer anticipation for Silksong.
Yeah, like here's the thing: the original game, the last time they gave us an actual proper sales update on it was 2019 when it was around 3 million sales. Now it's a Metroidvania Hollow Knight. 3 million sales, by the way, is comparable to the best-selling Metroid game ever. And that was 2019. It's been 6 years since then, so the game would have easily surpassed that now. It's quite a culty game. It's difficult to know if the huge online popularity is actually reflected in its overall sales. We don't know that because they've not shared it. But look, I actually found it quite amusing how Silksong's sort of re-reveal was during the Switch 2 Direct in a sort of montage of clips.
It was blink and you miss it, wasn't it?
Like it's like, hang on, maybe Nintendo get back in your box. Metroid 4 is coming out, but it was but an Xbox name dropped it during their showcase around their handheld that they showed. It has a rabid fan base. Look at the numbers. Number 1 wishlisted game on Steam. Number 5 on IGN. Number 4 trafficked on Fandom. Fancensus, social posts and press articles. It's number 7. I have no idea how big this game is. I know how we can hear the noise, but I don't know the actual data on how actual big it is. But it's also on every list. So and I think it's inevitably that's going to be one of the other big games of the year. The final big game of the year, of course, one game that's on every list. And I have to say, I was a little surprised by this. Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater.
Oh.
Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater was actually a commercially disappointing game. Fans loved it, critically very well, but it was a disappointing game. It did around 4 million copies, but I think Metal Gear Solid 2 did around 7 million copies. So it's not the biggest game in the world. It is right now, early 2000s nostalgia is big.
Yeah.
And so it hits that. It's also a genre of a game we don't see very much anymore. We've seen really games that go, you remember when we used to have stealth games?
I do. I miss stealth games.
Well, good news, James. One's coming out. But it is well loved. It's also a game that, from what I've I'm not a Metal Gear Solid player. I apologize. I've looked into this. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, or Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, is a game you can start Metal Gear on. Right, there is some nods to the previous games if you want to, but it's a game that you can start. They've dropped the 3 from the title. If you've noticed, it's Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, not Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. So I think that's part of their play of trying to say, hey, this is a jumping on point. It's not just for the fans of the original game. But look, number 8 on Steam wishlist, number 2 on the IGN wishlist, number 5 in terms of fandom traffic, number 6 in terms of press coverage, number 3 in terms of social activity. It's on every single list.
I'm interested to see how that one does, because it's one of those games, as you say, like wasn't commercially successful back in the day, but was critically held up. Like anecdotally, I feel like people talk more about 3 Snake Eater than they do about 2 or even 1. Like that seems to be the one that everyone's like, that's the one you must play. So this is going to give like a whole new generation the chance to see what all the fuss is about. Whether that translates to success, whether enough people are curious enough, I don't know. I mean, I feel like we haven't even seen much of it in terms of great detail. There's been a lot of kind of teasers and trailers and so forth. We haven't seen, granted, people can just look up the old version, but I personally haven't seen enough to find out what makes this the new shiny remaster that everyone, kind of like the Resident Evil remasters that Capcom have been doing. Perhaps the hope is that this can have that same success.
Konami did well with the Silent Hill remake last year as well. Silent Hill F, which I'm not talking about today, is actually on a lot of these lists. So Konami seems to have having a bit of a nostalgic moment really with some of its classic brands. But yeah, it's also by I think Virtuous are co-developing this one as well.
Yes.
So this is their second potentially hit game of the year. I think it's obviously going to do well. How well? Could it break out? Could it go beyond just the Metal Gear Solid fans? Oh, you never know. If it was an original game, maybe I would be a little more confident in it. It's whether or not it can sell to more people beyond the people who played it back in the day. Right. Those are the only games that appeared in every list, right? So it's Metal Gear Solid. It is Hollow Knight, Mafia, and Borderlands 4. That was it.
Which is an element of that is going to be, though, one of your lists is Steam, which is PC only. So you're factoring out console games.
Yeah, and it's also worth but even games that appear on most lists, Metroid Prime 4 is what I'm going to start with. Now, Metroid Prime 4 actually isn't in the social list either. Or is it the press coverage list? Let me just check that. It isn't in the. No, it's in the social activity. It's not in the press rankings. That's in terms of press articles. Nintendo hasn't shared a great deal about it, to be fair. So that's the reason why. Metroid Prime 4, this shows you the flaw in the lists. It's not on PC, obviously, as you said, it wasn't on that list. But Metroid is not a big franchise. Its high point, you know what the best-selling Metroid game ever is?
Is it still Dread?
It's Metroid Dread. It sold 3 million units. By Nintendo standards, that's barely worth getting out of bed for. Donkey Kong Bonanza, which isn't in any of these lists, I have to imagine that's going to be the bigger seller.
Yeah.
But it's a bit more of a mainstream game.
Yeah.
Whereas a bit more of a family game, a little bit game that appeals to kids. Metroid Prime 4 is a hardcore gamer's game. It ends up on these lists.
As you say, it shows the gamery nature of these lists.
I'm actually a massive. It sounds like I'm being dismissive of Metroid there. I love Metroid. It's one of my favourite franchises. This is one of my most anticipated games of the year. And I do believe it's a franchise that's due to do better. Well, you can see how well Hollow Knight does and that sort of genre of game does. It's an iconic character. A lot of the old Metroid games were a bit unfortunate. So the Metroid Prime 1, which was a big moment for Metroid, launched on the GameCube, which nobody really bought. I know there was some Metroid games on the Wii, but it was kind of the wrong Nintendo audience at that point. Super Metroid did very well. Some of the other Metroid games launched late in the cycle of the platforms they're on. This is Metroid Prime 4. It's cross-platform. It's on Switch 1. It's on Switch 2. It's probably the last major AAA Nintendo Switch 1 game, or just AAA Switch 1 game. Major. It's depending on your point of view. Switch 2, it runs really well. It looks really good. Maybe this one can do 5 million units. I like to think that there is an opportunity for Metroid to step up.
There's definitely an opportunity here, because of the success of Dread. I think people are a lot more aware of and more interested in the Metroid IP. Metroid Prime, like the original Metroid Prime, was such a revered game. We obviously had the remaster on Switch 1.
Yes, that did very well, yeah.
To me, that is still the best one in the Prime series. And so I'm quietly hoping 4 leans more towards because Metroid, certainly 3D Metroid is a really interesting series to market, because you show a trailer and it looks like a Halo style sci-fi shooter. it's not. It's a lot more about exploration, puzzle solving, scanning, everything.
And the demo that I played was quite, at the Nintendo event, it was at the opening segment.
That's the thing, yeah.
Which is the action-y bit.
Yeah.
And I remember playing Metroid Prime when I was a kid. I wasn't that young. I was like 18 or whatever. And I didn't get it. I couldn't work out why I wasn't shooting stuff all the time. I'd just come off Perfect Dark or whatever, Time Splitters.
See, I was the opposite. I was playing it, it's like, oh, thank God I'm not shooting stuff all the time. Like, I enjoyed the isolation and like, yeah.
My brain couldn't connect to it. And then years later, I played Metroid Fusion on the Game Boy Advance.
Yeah.
And I got, this is what this sort of game's about. And then when I've gone back to Metroid Prime, which I did with the remaster that they did, it is astonishing. It's astonishing work. So I'm really excited for Metroid Prime 4. But I don't think it's the biggest game in Nintendo's calendar for the year.
It's definitely not the biggest. Like, DK Bonanza's definitely there, and we're going to talk about another one, which I think is probably even more popular and more. But I'm hopeful for it because, going back to what we're saying about Hollow Knight, like there is an entire genre essentially named after or half named after the Metroid games. Yeah. So like the Metroid games, regardless of their success, have had an impact on the industry. Let's have Metroid have a little bit of that success. 2 popular platforms, great looking game. 3D games, which tend to appeal a bit more broadly. Maybe this one will break out. I still don't think it's going to be a big hit. What I do think is going to be a big hit is Ghost of Yotei on PlayStation 5. This is also on every list but the Steam list, obviously. But the Ghost of Tsushima, which is the sequel to, was a breakout hit for Sucker Punch and PlayStation back in 2020. They genuinely surprised. Everyone was really, they were shocked at how well it did. According to filings, it cost $60 million to make, and they made nearly $400 million in revenue. Am I going mad? Was that one of those August releases? I don't think Tsushima was a big Q4 one.
No, because Q4 was when the PS5 launched.
Oh, of course it was. Yes.
So it was that year. It was like after Last of Us Part 2. Yeah. This wasn't in the script. It's done about 13 million units. So it did very, very well, the first game. But we know that PlayStation first party games, they can do 20 million plus. We've seen that. So there is room for growth. Sony is planning a big promotion with this. They just announced a video showcase, state of play, whatever the term is. The recent Assassin's Creed game, Assassin's Creed Shadows, is similar in terms of, it's always had a similar sort of game, but it's similar in terms of audience and setting. And that did very well. It's worth noting that none of this guarantees success. Obviously, it needs to be good. But it's been a long time since we've had a big story-driven PlayStation 5 game. Spider-Man 2 is probably the last big one back in 2023. Now, I know people going, Death Stranding 2, Chris. Death Stranding 2. It's a little bit less mainstream.
Yes.
That one is a little bit more...
and it's not first party.
Yeah, it's funded by
first party, but it's not developed first party.
Death Stranding is more, for me, Death Stranding is in like the vein of Returnal in terms of it being a very specific audience, where this one is sort of a broader play. And the last time Sony did something like that was Spider-Man. It's been a long time, and I think fans love this stuff. They love Astrobot as well, but like, this is what they're waiting for. It isn't coming to PC yet, so it isn't on the Steam wish list, as we said earlier, but it's number 3 on IGN, number 2 on Fandom, number 3 in terms of overall press, coming to number 5 in social posts. It's going to be massive, and it's coming out in October. And this is where I'm going to start saying quite a few it's coming out in October games. Outer Worlds 2. Yes. Have you played the Outer Worlds? It feels like your sort of game.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I didn't get all the way through, but I certainly enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. It was a lot more focused. It was a lot, in a time when people were getting fatigued by like large sprawling open worlds, to have one where all the areas are quite contained and it's easy enough to do like the quest within a short distance. The writing was superb and like really kind of funny writing. I actually kind of preferred it to, it's kind of Obsidian's take on Fallout. I kind of preferred it to Fallout.
So some people told me that the Outer Worlds 2 is even more like Fallout New Vegas than the first game. I've not played either, so my expertise on this, I'm going what other people say to you. So the fact that you said it's like Fallout-y is great, because I'm about to say that. The game, it's quite Fallout-y. I'd be picking this one as a real potential, real big hit if it was called Fallout, especially with the second season of Fallout TV show arriving just before Christmas. As it is, because it's not Fallout, I still think it's going to be a big hit. So the first game, did 4 million units by 2022, right?
Nice.
That doesn't include Game Pass. It's not players, that's units, that's sales.
Yeah.
It's not Fallout numbers, but it's big numbers. It reviewed well, but it wasn't super high scores. It feels like what you'd expect from a first game. This is our first crack at this, and it got 80s in sort of Metacritic, a little bit lower on Switch. I always get excited for a sequel to a game like that,
Yeah.
because you know they're going to, all the things that people didn't quite like, they'll tweak and change, and all the things that they wanted to put into the game and they didn't have time to put into the game, they're going to stick into the game. It's that classic sequel.
The first one is always like kind of the proof of concept. Do people like this? Is this enough to like to that? And then the second one is like, right, people do like it. Let's do this properly. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, Borderlands 2. Leaps and bounds ahead of the original Borderlands. I think that's where the series success really started to take off before it hit the highs of 3. This should be, and Borderlands 2 is still held up as the best one in the series. This should be, hopefully, the Borderlands 2 of their series.
Yeah, well, or the Mass Effect.
Yeah, Mass Effect.
Or the Time Splitters 2.
Yes. Yeah.
Xbox is clearly going for this, and they received a standalone video after its summer showcase presentation. That standalone video, Microsoft's done 3 of these now. So they do their showcase and then they do a focus on one game at the end of it. The first one was Starfield.
The second one was Call of Duty.
And the Outer Worlds 2 is the latest one. So they're going for this. If you watch the video? I wasn't planning to. It was just on the background when I was
No, I missed it. It's on my watch list.
So Ben Schwartz he's like it's a very funny video. It's very much in the vein, but Ben Schwartz is in it and he does the whole, like, I'm the commission of sequels or whatever it is. And for those that know, Ben Schwartz is not very British known, I don't think, as a name. He's obviously the voice of Sonic in the Sonic the Hedgehog movies, but he's very well known in the US. He's in loads of things. He's also in the After Party on Apple TV. There are way bigger things he's been in, but I really think everyone should watch the After Party on Apple TV. So just wanted to drop that in there.
Fair enough.
But
not giving a shout out to the reboot of DuckTales then.
I forgot about that. David Tennant's in that. I should definitely have done that.
I've just.
So this is, I think Xbox is going for this. This is their big Christmas game. It looks great. It's on every platform. I do wonder if perhaps a different publisher would have said, make it a Fallout game. They didn't. They're going for this franchise.
I like that. We need more new IPs rather than converting everything to established ones.
We're talking about, I mentioned this in the article I wrote, we do criticize Xbox quite a bit, but I genuinely feared when they bought up all, and I still fear it a little bit when they bought up all these studios, that they've got Call of Duty. Do they need Wolfenstein? They've got, I know that they're different games, but like similar audiences. They've got Doom. Do they need Gears of War? They've got Fate. They've got Elder Scrolls. Do they need Fable and Avowed? But actually, in terms of the actual actions, they're still doing South of Midnights. They're still doing Clockwork Revolutions. They're still doing Keepers. They're still doing the Outer Worlds 2. They're still doing Avowed. They're not going, you might as well just focusing on the big franchises. And they've got a lot of them now. So they're not doing that. And this is one of those games that I think could become a big franchise. But interestingly, it's not super high on the lists. Like it's not in the Steam wish. It's not in the Steam wish lists. It is if you go to the full top 20.
Yeah,
it's number 18. But in the top 10, it's not in the top 10. Yeah, I think it's also, there's a Games for Windows element to it. There's a Game Pass element to it as well. Number 9 on IGN, number 6 on Fandom, number 8 in terms of press coverage. It's not actually in the top 10 for social posts. The numbers don't suggest anything too huge so far, but keep an eye on it. I think it'll creep up.
There's a vibe around it. There's a vibe. And there has been, like, since the original teaser, where, like, and I love that the teaser was a perfect example of why these games are fun. It's like it was a good few years ago and it didn't actually show anything. And then the narration was very explicit about how they have nothing to show. They only have the title and the logo. And it was just, and I think that got people talking about, that got people's interest.
Yeah, I think I just keep an eye on it. I think it'll creep up. Little Nightmares 3 is my next one. Now, this game is also due in October. There's a lot of October games. Little Nightmare I'm always surprised at how well this is done, right?
I profess ignorance. I forget about Little Nightmares and how well it does.
It's Bandai Namco's biggest Western game.
Yeah.
Right? 20 million copies of the first 2 games have been sold. You can get it on pretty much every platform as well. Yeah. They're super getting it everywhere. It's one of those, it's an arty sort of horror-y, I don't know why, even though it's nothing like it gives me a sort of Five Nights at Freddy's sort of vibe to it. Because it's sort of
it's got a very kind of indie vibe to it, but with the strength of a big publisher behind it.
And it's got that horror aesthetic, but it is a horror game, but it's almost like a accessible horror. Anyway.
It's a horror game, but it's not traumatizing.
Yeah. Well, maybe it is. I actually, but a little bit of there's a bit of pressure on this one because Little Nightmares is the brainchild of developer Tarsier. They created the first 2 games. They were bought by Embracer. And Bandai Namco own the IP.
God, yes.
So Bandai Namco sought a new studio to make Little Nightmares 3, and they're working with the horror experts over at Supermassive Games, which made Until Dawn. They worked on the Dark Pictures series of games. They're a safe pair of hands. Yeah. They're a decent studio. Whether or not they're the ones to really light up the franchise in a new way, they can do it, but have to see. Tarsia's developing their own game, which looks a bit like Nightmares.
This is historic. This is always interesting when you've got the developer of an IP who loses that IP but makes something similar. And that, I mean, Outer Worlds is they didn't have the IP for doing a New Vegas 2, so they made their own thing. Yeah, there's so many examples. There's Dying Light, Dead Island, Dying Light. Like it's this
Championship Manager, Football Manager.
Yeah,
the iconic one. Yeah. Their game's called Reanimate. That game doesn't have a release date yet. There's some speculation about it in 2025, but not enough for me to put this in this list. Also, I wouldn't have put it in the list anyway. Wouldn't have made this. But this is video games, as you quite rightly pointed out. We've seen people go from SimCity to City Skylines, right?
Yeah.
We've seen people go from Harvest Moon to Stardew Valley. We've seen people go from Championship Manager to Football Manager. If Little Nightmares 3 doesn't have to be bad, but if it doesn't light up the world or inspire the fans in the way the first two games did, they might go, what's that other one? What's that our old friends at Tarsier are making? So if there is pressure on it, they might end up, but...
Because it's one of those series that will have dedicated enough fans that will be aware of Tarsier's game and be keeping an eye on it. And I mean, blimey, you'll have fans who are just stubbornly like, no, I'm not playing Little Nightmares 3 because it's not Tarsier. Yeah. Like they've got some challenges.
Yeah. But look, at the moment, they're giving them benefit of the doubt. Number 5 on the Steam wish list, number 6 in the IGN playlist. The fandom list doesn't actually have it. I should have put this down. Fancensus has it in the... No, it's not there either.
Really enjoyed the elongated "the" there.
Yeah. Every other one of these, I've put them where they're listed. I didn't do it for this one. I don't know why. So that's it. So those are the games that appeared in lots of lists. We have gone through the games. So the games that appeared in all the lists, I mentioned those earlier, the ones that appeared in a lot of lists, but all of them, Metroid Prime 4, go to Yotei. Console games, The Outer Worlds 2, also a console first-party game, Little Nightmares 3. I want to mention a few notable ones. One is Ark Raiders. Do you know anything about this game?
Main thing I know, I didn't know about this until you sent me the list yesterday, but this is from the developer of the finals.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's related to the finals, but the finals was such a hit that automatically I think that they make this a one to watch.
Yeah, it is. It was going to be free to play. It's not now. It's an extraction shooter. And I go, but look, number 2 on the Steam wish list, according to Game Discover. It doesn't appear anywhere else. But that's I'm like, oh wow, okay. I have seen the trailers. I've seen them being showcased. It looks very striking, and the artwork's very striking, exciting. One game that also appears on a few lists, but low down, is Pokemon Legends ZA. Now I wanted to bring this up. It's on the IGN list. It's on the press list. On the social list. It's not on the GameSpot, so the fandom list, and obviously it's not on the Steam list because it's not a PC game. It's slightly surprising where this comes, considering Pokemon's rabid fan base.
Yeah.
What I will say, do you remember the launch of Pokemon Legends Arceus? Do you remember how out of the blue that came?
I do. Because it was sandwiched between... What was it between? There was a Pokemon launch the November before. I think it was Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl.
Yeah, literally 2 months before.
Yeah, 2 months before. A lot of nostalgia for Gen 4. You then had Legends Arceus, which was kind of tapping into sort of Gen 4 nostalgia, but doing something completely different. And then it was followed by Scarlet Violet the year later.
Yeah.
So Pokemon have been known to release games. They always have a big game every single November, and they'll have something somewhere in the middle.
It's a spin-off, but it was made by Game Freak. It's actually a proper Pokemon game, but they broke all the rules basically. Yeah. But very late in that marketing campaign, the game went from being pre-orders are pretty low to absolute explosion.
Yeah.
Strong reviews helps. It did 15 million copies, which sounds like a lot, but actually Pokemon Sword and Shield and Pokemon Scarlet Violet on 27 million.
Yeah,
right? But it's still a very, very strong, it's a mega performance. As in terms of Pokemon spin-off games, it's on another scale to what you normally see. This one, you would have thought, having Legends Arceus being so well received and done so well, that this would have reflected in anticipation for Pokemon Legends ZA. And I'm talking a bit personally here. I actually have not been won over by the trailers for that. It doesn't look at all like the last one. People have been stung, obviously, by recent technical performances in Pokemon games. Pokemon Legends Arceus didn't run great. It ran better than Scarlet and Violet, but it didn't run great. But look, if it's good, if it does, we had this last time. If it's good, like the last one, a late surge, I think. And look, Pokemon is always going to be big.
Yeah.
It's going to be big at Christmas. And I think the reason why they've now not sandwiched it between Pokemon games and actually given it its own spot. It's on Switch 2 enhanced. It's on Switch 1 as well. Yeah. It's obviously going to be a hit, but it's not. At the moment, the data isn't showing it. Also, out in October.
I'm intrigued because I'm part of the rabid Pokemon fan base as well. Legends Arceus is my favourite entry in the series, and I'm including the mainline ones.
Yeah, me too. I
love how it broke the rules. I love how it brought something different to the franchise. For me, it's the purest expression of that power fantasy of going out into the countryside and catching critters and so forth. I think you're right. Pretty much everything you just said. Like, I think the bitter taste left by Scarlet and Violet's technical problems, although I'm hearing it's amazing on Switch too.
So I've heard that, yeah.
So to the point where my daughter's a big Pokemon fan. I'm getting her Violet for her birthday in a couple of months. I might pick up myself Scarlet.
Yeah.
But Legends ZA, I think a problem is, and I don't know if this is why it's not winning you over, is the scope seems to have been drawn back in too much. Like, it's all set within one city, and yes, some of those city districts are, overgrown wild areas. But the joy of Pokemon games one of the joys of Pokemon games has always been traveling around a large and varied land with different biomes, different Pokemon and so forth. And this is just stuck in one city.
Pokemon Legends Arceus it's kind of old fashioned. It was set in a time before.
Yeah.
You had this central, very Monster Hunter really. You had this central sort of little village you could explore, but then you went into these different areas. Here's the one with the volcano in it. Here's the one with the snow in it. Here's the one with the beach in it. And it felt like, and this doesn't look, and also Pokemon Legends Arceus had an interesting art style, and this is the normal new Pokemon art style. I'm getting into the weeds a bit. It's not very businessy, this talk.
Sorry, I'll stop because I'm about to start comparing it to Zootropolis. So
it hasn't won me up. It hasn't won me over. But at the same time, I loved that catching mechanic. It was such a joy.
Brilliant.
So I want it to be brilliant. And look,
this is kind of a wait and see. If the reviews come out and people are like, this is better than Arceus or as good as Arceus, I think it will turn a few more heads because Arceus was so well received. But you've also got the thing of the Pokemon series 30th anniversary next year. So anticipation is going to be the Gen 10 is next year. So I know Pokemon fans typically can't wait a full year before buying a new Pokemon game, but people know something big is on the horizon with this one. And I think the last point, I promise, because I'm rambling too much, but I think the fact that there has been speculation that is Nintendo suddenly going to reveal a 3D Mario for Christmas because it hasn't had one at launch. And you've got the Switch 2's initial lineup is, you've got Mario Kart, DK, Metroid Prime, and Pokemon. And those are all big, but they're not like top tier.
It feels like something's missing. I've said that on the show before.
But now that we know that DK Bonanza is done by the Mario Odyssey team, that suggests a 3D Mario.
So I've been hearing a little bit about this, right? So obviously it's out in the reviews. People are reviewing the game. It is the Odyssey team, but it's not the exact same people who worked on Odyssey. There is some people who worked on Odyssey on it, including some of the senior people who worked on Odyssey, but not all of them.
Right.
I don't have the exact details. It's just what's been revealed to me in some WhatsApp messages here and there.
My point being, like, in the absence of a 3D Mario, like, your core Nintendo fans, your core Switch 2 players, like, they're going to have the option of Pokemon and Metroid Prime. Most of them are going, not most. I think there's a bigger audience for Pokemon Legends, regardless of how well it weighs up against previous ones.
Yeah.
I think there's a bigger audience.
Is Nintendo got another game out? I don't know if it'd be Mario, only because you've just released a Donkey Kong 3D platformer.
Yeah.
And there's a Mario movie next year, and if you're going to have a Mario game, would you coincide with that a bit closer? It's all speculation. Animal Crossing. Anyway.
Twilight Princess HD?
Yeah, that's the big one.
That's the big one.
Scrap it all. GTA, because years saved.
That's why GTA delayed, because they heard Twilight Princess HD is coming out.
Maybe a Wind Waker HD. Should we move on to some other news
we
stories?
Probably should, yes.
Yeah, let's. So that's those are the games. We'll keep talking about the games that are coming out, obviously, but those are the big ones from the with some data and some points that we should be paying attention to. It's a busy week for news. I really want to talk about some of these other stories. One of the ones, fanboys, James.
No, move on.
So obviously, I end up in their crosshairs quite a bit, but I just worry about them sometimes. Helldivers 2 is coming to Xbox. Right. And I'm not talking about Xbox fanboys here. I'm talking about PlayStation fans. There's been people in my feed, PlayStation fans, saying they're going to sell their PS5 Pro because Sony has released a game. Absolutely. So I understand it is actually being is a Sony related relationship. This is Sony that wanted this to happen. Helldivers 2 is a game that fits very well. It's a live service game, so Sony's reaction to live service games put them on PC. Xbox isn't the biggest platform in the world, obviously.
No, I find that really interesting because like if you release something on Xbox, it makes sense to release something on PlayStation after because that is a much, much bigger audience. It feels odd to me to go the other way.
But I do think Helldivers is quite an Xboxy game. It's an online shooter.
It fits with their audience, doesn't it?
It has that sort of vibe to it, which is why I'm surprised they're launching it on the same day, same week as the new Gears of War.
That isn't odd. That is a choice.
So that is a choice. That's the bit that surprises me. Helldivers 2 coming to Xbox makes sense. In fact, I see it in the same way as when they released Lego Horizons, which by the way, also was a PlayStation decision. It was not a Lego decision. That was PlayStation. Look, I've talked about this many times. We're in a world where video games costs are going up and getting audiences' attention is harder. Putting your games out on more platforms is a way of growing that. Obviously, you don't want to hurt your platform business. Xbox is perhaps a little less worried about that for being a smaller platform. But PlayStation doesn't want to hurt its platform business. Is putting Lego Horizons on Switch going to hurt PlayStation 5 sales? No. Is Helldivers 2 coming out 18 months later on Xbox going to hurt PlayStation 5 sales?
Not a chance.
No. So those are different scenarios. But everyone's trying to grow their IP through films, through releasing games on more platforms, through mobile, through TV, through theme parks, through alarm clocks. It's all part of that. So yeah, I'm excited. Helldivers is a great story. I love the story. Hopefully we had Shams on the show, who's the CEO of Arrowhead, and I'm hoping to get him back on. In short time, we can talk about a bit of that. Also in the news, Nintendo was asked a question during its normally really, really boring investor Q&A, where they were asked about the rising cost of video game development, the lengthening dev cycles, and basically they were concerned about the price of Nintendo games going up. But it's obviously a big issue facing the whole industry. Nintendo doesn't normally comment much about this. They do talk about how they are mindful of rising costs. He gave an answer about, we need to work out about how to bring costs down. Right, everyone's doing that. But he also said, we also believe it is possible to develop games with shorter development periods that still offer consumers a sense of novelty. We see this as one potential solution to the concern about rising development costs and software prices, and we'll explore it from various angles within the company. Now, this is, I know Sean Layden's probably doing cartwheels. This is what he's been saying for a long, long time.
Well, so many people have. There's been this real appetite and call for shorter, more focused games because so many, certainly in the AAA space, so many games are trying to be as mainstream as possible and appeal to everyone. And the classic, the adage is, you appeal to everyone, then you appeal to no one. So having something of a lot more focus, also hopefully help with their Nintendo's ongoing cadence of one hit every month or two. They usually have a game a month or two. Keeping them shorter is the way to ensure that pipeline.
Yeah, he doesn't actually say shorter, but I think what I wonder, there are things. I'd be interested how Nintendo approach it because they always do things in slightly different ways. My brain goes to, you've made Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. It took you 100 years to make. It's very, very good. And now you've got, reinvent the wheel again and do another 6 years of a Zelda dev cycle. Or could you do a spin-off utilising some of the stuff they've done before, the Majora's Mask style, follow-up to Ocarina of Time? Could you, you can play around with new ideas and new concepts in the smaller game settings. I think Bowser's Fury is a wonderful example. Actually, the Mario team made Mario Odyssey. Everyone says, it's not been a Mario game since Mario Odyssey. Yes, there has.
Yeah.
It was called Bowser's Fury. It was packaged in with the Mario 3D world release. And it is short, but it's novel and it's interesting.
It's brilliant. My game of the year that year, I remember, I seem to recall. It's the prime example. That is a prime example of the sort of stuff that we'd like to see. And it gives you... It gives you room to experiment and do different things that you can then feed into your larger, longer in development. We said earlier about first game in a series being proof of concept. If you can do proof of concept in a smaller title that's kind of a spin-off, and then take the learnings from that and then feed into your larger tentpole titles, I think that's an efficient way of doing things. Yeah,
Miles Morales and Spider-Man. There's loads of these examples, and that's not what Nintendo's necessarily saying.
No,
if you don't know what they're saying.
Tears of the Kingdom, Miles Morales confirmed.
Yeah, but I just think there are ways, obviously, they can do it. They can release more games without. But also, they still want to do those big blockbusters. That's still got to happen as well. It's a matter of balance. Another story, I've sort of seen the headlines, I've read the bits about this, and I maybe stupidly roll my eyes at it because I thought, a fan petition about game access, basically. But this one's getting a bit of traction. Stop Killing Games, the consumer-driven initiative that's asking game publishers to leave their titles in a playable state once support for those games have stopped. It's gone past 1 million signatures. And the result of that is the EU industry body. We used to know them as ISFI. They're now called they're called Video Games Europe. And they represent, obviously, all the big games publishers, EA, Activision, Warner Brothers, Take-Two, that kind of stuff. And Nintendo has weighed in. They've said, we appreciate the passion of our community. However, the decision to discontinue online services is multifaceted, never taken lightly. It must be an option for companies when an online experience is no longer commercially viable. We understand that it can be disappointing for players, but when it does happen, the industry ensures that players are given fair notice of the prospective changes in compliance with local consumer protection laws. Private service are not always a rival option. What they talk about here, and this is genuinely it is the legal issue of having a game that you are responsible for, an IP you are responsible for, putting it out there, and then that user doing stuff with it users doing stuff with it you're not supposed to, doing something illegal with it. It's not just about brand damage. It's about being illegal and doing things with it, and then you're liable for that. Yeah,
you're held accountable. You private servers, while from a player's perspective makes sense because you're giving the players the option to handle things themselves. You're also relinquishing control of your game and what happens in it. But you're not relinquishing the accountability. You are still absolutely 100%. I read the Video Games Europe response, and as in so many things, I always try to see both sides of the perspective. I very much live on the fence, and with this one, I absolutely see where players are coming from. It is frustrating that, the prime example for this, I believe one of the things that kicked off the campaign was the crew. Yeah. Even when the crew was shut down, because there's so many online features riddled into the single player, you cannot play the single player game anymore. So the game you own is just a disc that does nothing. It's a coaster. I get the frustration there. But then reading the Video Games Europe response, but private servers is a potentially dangerous alternative. Given that so many of these games have the online-only features built into them from the ground up, it is difficult and expensive to redevelop your game to operate offline. So it's not as easy as, you can still play it. It's difficult. I'm really intrigued to see if from this campaign, regardless of whether or not he gets any kind of legal output, because I think the campaign itself has got enough signatures that it now is on the way to being discussed in various kind of legislatory places the European Commission. I'm intrigued to see if, even if there's no kind of solid outcome from this, if developers start thinking differently about how they make their games, because we've talked about this before. Live service games are struggling. In the grand scheme of things, live service games are struggling. It is so incredibly difficult to launch a new live service game that can certainly compete with the likes of Fortnite and Roblox and so forth, but can even carve out a niche that is sustainable enough that you're getting enough revenue to keep your live service game going. So I would like to think developers are now more thinking, right, we're going to develop this live service game, but what's our plan for if this fails? What do we do to ensure, how do we future-proof our game on the assumption of failure? What is there internal processes the company can have in order to make the game, it's clearly a problem. The solution isn't clear. No. But it's more complicated than just put it on private service. Massively,
There's a couple of other small stories I'll touch on before we close up. Romero Games have not closed down.
No.
Following the news that which I think they wouldn't name the publisher, but it's pretty obvious which publisher it was. Was releasing their game, and now they're not releasing their game, so they've lost, I think. And what's worth noting is a lot of people in the US don't quite understand, or they've closed down. They've not closed down. They've said that staff said they're out of jobs. This is EU consultancy, right? Yeah. So when you get made redundant in the UK, you have a process of you have to go through a process, right? And it's slightly different in country to country, but you don't just get handed a box and you walk out the door. There is a process that has to be gone through. And so if Romero Games are basically making all of its team redundant, it has to go through that process. It's obviously kickstarted that process, I assume, because they don't have that revenue coming in anymore, and they need to be prepared for that. But it sounds like they're also using this time in the process to try and secure a new publisher, new homes, some new money, so that they can hopefully avoid having to lay people off. That's what's going on with Romero Games. For those that are a little confused about the what's happening there. But again, there's going to be a lot of aftershocks from the Xbox thing. It's worth noting games like Perfect Dark was being developed by Crystal Dynamics. It had some support by Sumo. A lot Everwild. I don't actually know, but there's other people working on it. Contractors.
So few games come out now without at least some sort of outsourcing or co-development. So this is going to have a knock-on effect.
Yeah, there'll be other companies that might have to make adjustments as a result of this.
So it's always a shame to see any studio in this position. So I am gutted to see what's happening to Romero Games. It's one of those cases though where hopefully Romero Games, I don't think is one of those companies that will ever not exist at all.
I think as long as the Romeros are alive,
exactly. Even if it gets down to, and I really hope it doesn't come to this, but even if it gets to the place where it's just John and Brenda at home making games or planning to make games, they can grow it again.
They can reboot it. Yeah, I'm hoping that's the case. I suspect that's the case. And finally, I end on a quite small story. Well, it's not a small story. Not if you live in Germany. The German federal government is increasing public funding for game development to 125 million euros. That's more than double. It's up from 50 million euros. This is according to the German Games Industry Association, which doesn't spell out game. It's great to see global investment continuing here in video games. We've just seen some new measures in the UK.
Yeah.
Some of the countries are sort of going the other way. But it's interesting with the market going through its contraction to see public spending sort of coming into it a little bit more. German is all part of it. They've got some tax relief stuff coming down the line, they believe. So this is sort of an interim measure, but it's it's more investment in video games.
This is really good. I'm trying to remember. I'm struggling to remember the details because we covered this a lot when we were at GamesIndustry.biz, and I believe Matt Handrahan, our former editor-in-chief, my predecessor. He lived in Germany.
Oh, of course he did, didn't he?
And so he knew a lot of the German scene. And I remember him saying this is a really big deal. When the funds started coming in, there was I think we covered the campaign to try and secure the public funding. And he was just saying this is a really big deal. There are a lot of studios in Germany, of all sizes. So, Germany's a big games market as well.
That's huge. It's the second biggest. Well, it depends on the month, really. But Germany, France, and UK are the triple giants of the European games market. And actually, Germany's games industry, we've recently had everyone's looking at Expedition 33 in France, going, "Hang on, where's ours?"
What's the German Clair of Skill?
Yeah, but and then equally before then, it was what's the Italian CD Projekt? You know? And so there's a lot of Europeans looking over each other's shoulder, going, "Oh, we want a bit of that." So it's good. Great to see. That's all we've got time for. One thing I thought to mention, we're in person.
We are.
And the reason for that is we're at Develop Brighton, which I don't have too much going on here. And I don't think you do either, but this is our old home in a way, because when we worked at MCV Develop Awards took place here. Yeah. One thing I want to talk about, actually, not even talk about, trying to bring up, the Develop Awards. Were you responsible for Kojima coming?
Oh, partly responsible.
And the Stampers.
Yes.
Right? This is why the media needs you back, James, right? It's getting people like that to come to these awards. So I didn't have anything to do with the Developer Awards. That was you for a little bit. It was Michael French before you. And that was that happened here at Develop Brighton. And then, of course, when we moved to Games in Shop, is the summer party that GI throws here. And we'll go into that to sort of reunite with our old friends later on. But yeah, it's nice to be here.
It's nice. I've been up since half five this morning because I drove here this morning. But walking along the coast, this is one of those places, this is right up there with Cologne in terms of it's one of those places where you spend so much time in for a work event and you have such a good time at the work event that as soon as you get here, even though it's been a full year, it feels like it was last week.
Yeah, it's great. I'm looking forward to it, and I know that we'll see each other throughout the rest of the show.
Absolutely.
But for now, James, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you so much for having me back.
It's been an absolute joy, and we'll have you back again. I know that if I could, you'd be back every week. That's it for today's episode. We will be back next week. If you want to make sure you don't miss an episode, don't miss a newsletter, don't miss a post, go to thegamebusiness.com, put in your email address, you won't miss a thing if you haven't done so already. Or you can subscribe to us on our YouTube channel or via your podcasting platform of choice. Until next time, thank you for tuning in.